That was a traditional Bharata Natyam greeting that we would do at the beginning of a dance class or at the beginning of anything that we started. This is Subathra Subramaniam, no relative, spelt differently, but Anusha's going to be my dancer for the talk and for the demonstrations that I'm going to be doing. I love dance. I love everything about dance. I love dancing it. I love choreographing it. I love watching it. I especially love watching my 3-year-old dancing in our kitchen. And it gives me great joy. And I think very, very early on, I realized that what I really wanted to do was just do it in any form I could. So very, very early on, I was choreographing some seriously good disco numbers. John Travolta, really, to blame for that. And I think I was so into it that my mum got really quite fed up because I would watch these Tamil films that would start with really lovely stories, and then suddenly a couple would come along and they would embrace, and then they'd break into song for no apparent reason. And then suddenly there'll be a random group of dancers who would all dance in the most amazingly coordinated way, and I'd just copy it. And soon my mum thought, I think there's enough is enough. At the age of 6, I started to learn a very classical, ancient form of Indian dance called Bharata Natyam. And I still feel very fortunate to have this as a tool that I now make work with. And Bharata Natyam used to be a form that was performed in the temples of South India as a form of worship, in these beautiful structures and very symmetrical corridors. And it really was just a human way of worshipping. And very soon that changed and the form has evolved, and now it's performed all over the world in all sorts of contexts and in ways that are so different to how it started. So the form has evolved a huge amount. And really what I want to talk about is how that form has evolved for me to allow me now to do the things that I do. So after discovering the form, I learned it as a hobby, as you would do, as one would, in the way that you would learn classical ballet. So it's very codified, it's very gestural. And when I started learning it, I was doing it all the way alongside my academic career. And it was really only after my degree in biochemistry that I decided that actually I wanted to be a dancer. And I went and danced with dance companies. And what I learned quite quickly whilst dancing with companies is I wanted to push the form out of those boundaries that it was in. I wanted to push it architecturally, I wanted to push it dynamically, I wanted to push it in the way I worked with dancers, in the way the dancers interacted on stage. So I started to choreograph work, and I started to make work that really tried to push those boundaries. So in a way, what I'd like to show you a little bit is a little bit of an insight into that process of how that form has evolved and been pushed. And just to give you a background, Anusha and I haven't actually worked on this before. So what you're seeing is structured improvisation. And the reason for that is I wanted to give you an insight into what happens in the studio working with dancers and not giving you a structured, here you go, this is how it was made scenario. So what I'd like to show you is just to take a tiny step or movement material from the form, done in its traditional context, in its traditional way. And I'd just like to see how we push and work with it in slightly different ways. And I hope we're going to start with the actual traditional way of performing different movements, and we're going to do different things. Now we'd like to push this slightly further from the way that it was just done in the formalized way. Thank you. So that's just an idea of showing you a very traditional movement and then taking it out of that context. And I could, in theory, lay another layer onto that and bring a concept or an idea into that as well. After my degree in biochemistry and dancing for various different dance companies, I very strangely decided I was going to be a science teacher. And I wanted to go down the science route. And then my parents were saying, well, dance, career, really? Are you mad? It's the arts. How are you going to earn any money? So with this kind of nagging thought at the back of my head, I studied to become a science teacher. But again, whilst teaching science, I realized, oh my goodness, how do we engage people in scientific concepts? You know, we pick up a paper, I'm teaching out of a textbook, I'm trying to make my lessons really interesting, but actually, what I can do is I have this tool, I have this dance form, I have this language that I can use, an artistic language. It's a way of getting to people, getting to people's hearts, making people understand, as opposed to just teaching it. So I very quickly left the teaching and started creating work, really a work that allowed people to engage with scientific ideas and concepts. What I never professed to do in many ways is to teach, because I can't teach a concept through the movement. What I really wanted was really to instill a curiosity, an engagement. If somebody picked up a science paper next week, or a magazine, or picked up a science section within a broadsheet newspaper, but actually read it but didn't throw it away, that in itself for me was enough, and that was my thinking about creating work. So I found myself collaborating with some really interesting scientists, and I made a really important decision quite early on that I would only work with scientists with interesting names. So I started to work with Professor Morten Kringelbach on a project about neuroscience, about what makes us shiver, whether it's through pain or pleasure. And then I started to work with a project called, this is not a strange name, called Cape Farewell, which brings together artists, scientists, educators to raise awareness about climate change. And I fortunately found myself in the Arctic on 5 different occasions in different parts of the Arctic. And with all the research I did, everything pointed back to this notion of water and how fundamental it was, and how fundamental it was that we engaged with some of the ideas in our cultural relationship with water. So I made a piece called Elixir about water. So what I'd like to do is, again, take this notion of movement and pushing it to various different places to give you an idea of how the work developed from that language. And then looking at what happens when the water gets less and less. And less. And how that can affect the whole physical body when there isn't enough water. Thank you. And this is just a tiny, tiny insight into how very small movement material, so this would then develop into something that it's a whole evening's piece, and really taking that idea of water, the lack of it, the abundance of it, right through to the whole of the body, and really physicalizing that. And using the whole body as a tool of that expression. And again, the idea is that at the end of the performance, I hoped somebody would maybe turn the tap off when they were brushing their teeth, or just thought a little bit about it. And it's that kind of emotional engagement, which is what I really tried to do. And then one day, I went to a science festival, and name coming up. I was watching Professor Roger Kneebone, a surgeon, doing a surgery simulation in an inflatable operating theatre, again, with the notion of public engagement. the operating theatre is such a closed, intimate, private world, which I learned when I spent 2 to 3 days watching surgery after surgery after surgery and just watching the dynamics. And I realized straight away, actually, watching surgery is incredibly choreographic. The relationship, the gestures, and all of it lended itself so wonderfully to Bharata Natyam, the form that I have. And I really wanted to work, and all of my works are hugely collaborative. Nothing is done on my own. I couldn't work without the scientists, the musicians, the artists, and fundamentally my dancers, who really embody everything that goes through our heads. And so I created a piece called Under My Skin, which really looks at this closed world. Again, not teaching people surgery, but really allowing people in. Because by the time you go into an operating theatre, you're out. You come out and you're not in the theatre anymore. But actually just giving people that opportunity to ask questions, to engage with the scientists, to ask about the process. So what I'd like to do is give you an opportunity to try some of these gestures out. So, just starting, if you're really squeamish, and if any of the words I'm saying about surgery are really squeamish to you, feel free not to do it. But I'd just like you to sense what it feels like in your hands and realize actually it's quite easy. So, we're going to start with a retractor. You can do that with your hands. Put it down. Imagine you have a patient in front of you, and the patient has just been cut open for surgery, so you pull the retractor. Sorry, I know, it's pre-coffee, so you're fine. The next gesture is your thumb, your first finger, and your second finger together. You pull the tissue apart. Sorry, again. Now you have a tiny little suture, so with a hook of a finger, you pull it out, and with the next scissor, you cut. There you go, that's a surgical procedure. Should we do that together? One more time. Retractor, so 1, 2, 3, 4, pull 5, 6, cut 7, 8. Again, 1, 2, pulls tissue out, pull 5, 6, and 7, 8. Last time, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Give yourself a round of applause. Fantastic. Thank you. Now, I'd like to show just very quickly how, and Anusha's definitely not done this before, so we're going to improvise on this notion of surgery, balance, and relationship with bodies in the space and how we can extend that. Now we're going to take that into our bodies. Thank you. So the thought I'd like to leave you with really is, what's your Bharata Natyam? I found this language, for me, that gave me this opportunity to find my own voice through what I do and my own way of expressing it, albeit through a route that allowed me to evolve it. So I think within all of us, there is a Bharata Natyam. There is a language, there is an art, there is a way to express what we feel passionately and are motivated by. And I think it's finding that, and our journeys through that has allowed me, really, to do this work that I feel really excited and passionate about. So thank you.